Hi, hello. I thought I'd just take a moment to give you some insight into what happens in your mind or in your brain when we're looking at your future. You're probably all looking ahead now to next day, next week, next month, maybe even next year if you've got exams and various other unknown entities on the horizon. And it might be useful just to remind you or tell you for the first time, if you haven't heard this before, how your brain can work with you or against you when you're planning that future that you want. So remembering that our brain actually is in our mind, in our head, to ensure our survival. So that means that actually it's always going to be looking for potential dangers and the worst case scenario for your future. We need to be aware of that, because if we're aware of it, then we can recognise when it's telling us maybe a story that isn't necessarily right or necessary for us to act upon. Now, I don't know whether you've heard the Henry Ford quote before, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Have a moment to think about that, because actually it's spot on. If we want our brains to work with us to enable us to create the future of our dreams, the future that we want, we need to be exercising the right part of our brain that enables us to make that happen. Now, if we're worrying about our future and being encouraged to negatively forecast it, i.e., all the things that could possibly go wrong, then we're going to be firing up the part of our brain that actually steps in to help you in those cases. It thinks you need it, and it behaves in a certain way that actually perversely stops you from achieving that. It will encourage you to look for even more problems. It will maybe make you feel very worried and anxious, maybe angry, maybe depressed and down. But either way, it's because the brain is actually thinking that it's doing its job properly and keeping you alive. So it's important to recognise these triggers, because ultimately, if we choose to tell us a story that is the future that we want as we want it to be, then we're not going to be firing up the primitive response that steps in and dictates our behaviour. I hope that makes sense. If you think about all of our Olympians and elite athletes, and you yourself might be a sports person, and you probably spend quite a lot of time practicing, because we know that practice makes things better. We get better the more we practice. It's the same with our head, the same with this brain of ours. The more we use our control centre and the more we utilise the part that makes us the people we want to be, the stronger it will become. Now, going back to the analogy of sport, if you have been playing a game, or maybe you're a sole sports person, you spend a lot of time physically practicing, but I'm sure you also spend quite a lot of time imagining how you want it to be. You might not even realise that's what you're doing. But a lot of our elite sports people have people like me working with them to enable them to mentally rehearse the outcome that they desire. Because we know that if we can tell the brain the message that everything's going to go well and that we're going to win the race or win the match or throw further than we've ever thrown if you're a shot putter. I only say that because I've been working with one recently. But whatever it is, if we can imagine the outcome that we want as we want it to be, then you are exercising the part of your brain that allows you to remain in control. And because you're in control, then heaven forbid if it doesn't quite go to plan, which, life doesn't always, you're going to be able to rationalise and deal with the situations as they arise in a far more beneficial way for you. So it really does matter the story you tell yourself. It's taking time to imagine that future as you want it to be, whether it's tomorrow, next month, or in a year's time. There's a huge amount of positive evidence that shows us that this mind of ours doesn't know the difference between what we imagine and what is our reality. So if we can imagine how we want things to be, then the brain will feel happy and it will behave accordingly and enable us to make that come true. Whereas if we worry and we negatively forecast, the brain will step in and help, and it will encourage more of the same, and it will make it very hard for you to feel happy and in control of that future of yours. Now, there's a great experiment that I read about literally just this morning, which demonstrates the power of our imagination. They've been working very hard on looking at ways that we can help to manage pain, because pain for a lot of people is very limiting. And they found that if they showed a picture through those goggles, I don't know, you'll know what they are, the imaginary goggles, then if they showed the patient a picture of their arm where the pain was, but they coloured it blue or green rather than red, the brain didn't seem to think it was as much of a problem, and the pain went away. It's interesting, isn't it? If they coloured it red, the pain got worse, and that's because we've taught our brains that red means danger, and a painful area on our body that's coloured red usually would mean to us that it was a problem. Whereas if we tell the brain that where the pain is green or blue, bizarrely the brain hasn't learned anything about that, so it's just not as big a problem, and it's all imaginary. There's nothing factual about that at all. It's just the brain's processing ability. So we can use that analogy for our future. If you negatively forecast your future, i.e. you colour it red, for example, you may choose a different colour, then you're going to be firing off all those negative emotions and all of the parts of the brain that will step in to help you, but indirectly, actually in it helping, it makes it worse. Or you can colour that future of yours green or blue, or you may choose to go for a colour pink or orange, but a positive, happy colour with a positive and happy image of how you wish it to be. And then guess what? Because the brain doesn't know the difference, it's going to play with you and enable you to make that future the way you want it. I hope that helps. It's probably a little bit upside down and back to front in a way, but that's the joy of how our brains work. Just remember that simple phrase that we started off with. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Good luck.